Pay close attention. Can you hear it? That silent vibration at the back of your mind, that pulse beneath your skin, that voice that has been speaking to you long before you could articulate it. The person who insisted that you weren't like them and warned you that they wouldn't be able to deal with you if they ever got close enough to sense your true nature. However, the world intervened, encircled your fire with its icy hands, and attempted to mold you into a shape that wasn't meant for you. Stay in your lane, they advised. Don't push too far, don't step too deep, don't show too much. Well, they wanted you to be predictable, controlled, and contained because they knew that if you ever stopped holding back and let even a small amount of your true power slip through the cracks, things would break and could never be put back together. Your untamed self is deadly to their delusions, which is why they wanted you tame. They persuaded you that you were just another hand in their machine, a voice they didn't have to be afraid of. But tell me, when you're with individuals who don't think highly of you, have you ever had a spark beneath your ribs, pressure in your chest, or an odd electric tension crawling up your spine? That's not anxiety. That is not a sign of insecurity. That's power attempting to penetrate your courteous exterior. Every time they attempted to repress you, instinct sharpened itself on the bones. They recognized something in you that you never learned to sense in yourself. So they spent years dousing your fire with water, suffocating your intuition with doubt, and silencing your instincts. Something untamed and raw, something that, if you ever let it breathe, could completely change the dynamic. What's the best part? Nevertheless, they sense it, even when you don't understand why others react to you the way they do, even when you're quiet and holding back. Oh, I see. Have you not seen it? The way their stance changes when you enter, the way their eyes flicker the instant you focus on them, and the way their voice tightens to a degree they hope you don't notice. They make an effort to hide it, smile through it, and act as though something inside of them is unstable. However, instinct cannot be concealed. Long before their words reveal the truth, their bodies do. They sense something about you that undermines their sense of control, something you haven't quite figured out yet. They lack the vocabulary to express how deadly you are. It has nothing to do with your words, actions, or even decisions. It's your presence, your uninvited movements, your unapproved thoughts, and your unreserved stance. You don't match the expectations, the pattern, or the mold. They observe you in the same way that people observe approaching storms, beautiful, erratic, and able to destroy anything that isn't constructed to endure reality. They are unable to classify you. You are unpredictable to them. You cannot get ensnared in the story they tell to keep everyone else under control. And people are afraid of what they cannot control, not because you're loud, not because you're violent, and not because you're loud, not because you're violent, and not because you're white, forced white. They are afraid of you because you are uncontrollable. Your independence reveals their enslavement and your ability to breathe without their consent. That's what scares them. They glance away too quickly after staring for too long because of this. Because of this, their criticism comes out as frantic and their appreciation is flimsy. This explains why someone once became too near to you, too close emotionally, too close intuitively, and too close energetically. And something inside them recoiled like if their soul had come into contact with a live wire the instant they touched the part of you that isn't small, fragile, or fearful. They sensed the savage you didn't realize you were still harboring, the one you believed you had hidden behind civility, self-control, and being suitable enough to endure the environment they made you live in. However, that aspect of you survived. It held out. Silently, it owned itself. It observed. Before you even realized it was growing, it discovered the shape of your strength. Therefore, they sensed an ancient rising in you when they got too close and attempted to read, manipulate, or study you. Not fury, not mayhem, but consciousness. The kind of awareness that exposes individuals exactly where their masks are cracking. The kind of awareness that cuts deeper than any blade. They experienced fear at that point. Not the dread of danger, but the fear of revelation, the fear of seeing too much, the fear of being duped, and the fear that your quiet is calculated rather than meaningless. Weak folks don't worry about getting wounded. They're afraid of being noticed. And whether you realize it or not, you make others see themselves. They react the way they do around you because of this. Their voice shifts as a result. Their vitality stutters because of this. Their voice shifts as a result. For this reason, they keep you at a distance while also keeping a close eye on you. You are a loose thread in their meticulously constructed safety nets of self-delusion, a fault in the matrix they've created around themselves. They created this universe for repeat customers, followers, and those who confuse objection with maturity. They created it for brains that they can numb with habit, divert with noise, and bribe with validation. However, you are not a part of that system. You view as, you watch. With only one glance, you can remove layers. And even before you decide to be a threat, that makes you one. They want you to be dull because of this. They want you to be apprehensive because of this. They want you to be apprehensive because of this. They want you to be perplexed about your own strength because of this. Because they can act as though your power doesn't exist as long as you don't recognize it. However, the whole game changes as soon as it begins. Everything changes as soon as you experience even a small portion of your actual power. Cease transforming your nature into forms intended for smaller people, and stop apologizing when your energy makes them uncomfortable. And they are aware of it. When you make it through something that ought to break you, they know it. When you don't flinch at the things that drive people into a tailspin, they can tell. When you heal more quickly than they anticipate, they can tell. When your silence has greater impact than their yelling, they can tell. When your silence seems like an unpredictable storm, they can tell. You don't realize how long they have been studying you. Out of caution, not adulation. Because the one person in the room who doesn't require control always scares the individuals who depend on it the most. They cover it up with politeness, passive praise, and superficial interest. However, you have witnessed the reality in Aristobal, that fleeting epiphany, that instinctual understanding, the realization that you are not like them and will never be able to fit in. For years, they have deceived you by claiming that true power is found in titles, money, position, and visibility. They informed you that power is something you acquire, but only via them, something you get, but only with their consent, and something you express, but only when it suits them. Everything is false. It's a clever tactic to keep you modest while satisfying your need for approval, just enough to maintain your obedience, because their whole illusion would crumble if you ever ceased to require their approval. The true measure of power is how little of you can be owned, not how much. The true measure of power is not the number of followers, but rather the depth of your self-awareness when no one applauds. True power comes from the silence that others dread, not from the noise you produce. Your power is intrusive rather than explosive. It slides beneath the skin. It disarms individuals without coming into contact with them. It reveals the cracks they conceal. Their responses to you show how insecure they are, and in ways you don't even fully comprehend. That renders you invincible. Do you believe that your scary nature is the reason people avoid you? No. They stay away from you because being in your presence triggers the aspect of themselves that they have been avoiding. The mirror they fear is you, the reminder of what they could have become if they hadn't given in to their frailty. They refer to you as being excessively intense, excessive, or unique because of this. They have a different code term for "I cannot handle you." However, this is the point at which everything changes. The moment you begin to interpret their reactions rather than believe what they are saying. The moment you recognize that every criticism you receive is evidence of your influence. The moment you begin to see your intuition as the weapon it has always been and cease to minimize it. And you're standing there now. They hoped you would never come into contact with the edge of the truth, because something permanent occurs once you cross that boundary and truly see yourself through your own clarity rather than through their fears. The power you've been holding will always be visible to you. You will never be able to pretend that your presence doesn't affect every room's temperature. You will never be able to go back to a time when you didn't comprehend why people react to you with discomfort disguised as worry, envy disguised as advice, and fear disguised as annoyance. All of a sudden you begin to notice how their eyes change before they speak. Before they even open their tongues, you can suddenly sense the hesitancy in their enthusiasm. All of a sudden you realize that all those odd times when you were treated like a threat without any justification were never miscommunications. Their instincts were responding to your reality. You're only now awakening to this reality. You begin to relive memories, don't you? Things that, up until now, didn't make sense. There were times when someone approached you too closely on an emotional, psychological, or spiritual level, and something within recoiled. They didn't back away from you. They shied away from what they sensed within you. That silent power, that unwavering serenity, that depth that defies all expectations. Beneath your control, they sensed the ferocious, the one you didn't purposefully let loose, the one that emerges when someone tries to subjugate, dominate, or manipulate you, the person who discreetly observes, examines, and computes while believing you are merely being courteous. Once, someone went too much closer than they ought to have been. They unintentionally touched the brink of your true essence, not the one you present to the world, not the one you conceal yourself behind, not the version you dilute to make the weak feel better. No, they made contact with the version that is unyielding, unbreakable, and intolerant of foolishness. The part of you that sees danger before it identifies itself. The version that can be heard without raising its voice. The variant that can triumph without engaging in combat. This is the version with a silent authority that cannot be acquired, taught, or stolen. More people are unaware of the version of you that has endured, and they terrified as soon as they sensed it, even for a brief period. Not significantly, not externally. It was an inward panic. Their pupils flickered, their chests tightened abruptly, and the energy around them shivered a little. Something their minds were unable to comprehend was revealed by their instincts. It is not appropriate to touch you carelessly. It's difficult to understand you. People who have not mastered themselves are not supposed to handle you. They are unable to contain your kind of energy without shattering something within themselves. You also sensed it, didn't you? Not as hostility or rage, but as a subtle change in your being. Your intuition stood taller than your body for a moment, stiffening and sharpening. You remained the same. You recalled. You refrained from attacking. You disclosed. There was no violent outburst from the savage. In consciousness, it was let loose. The knowledge that something deeper and older within you can protect you without you having to defend yourself. The knowledge that whatever you are composed of cannot be lessened, controlled, or altered. The understanding that your strength is in who you are rather than what you do. They are afraid of you because of this, because they feel vulnerable when you exercise your authority. They feel unsteady when you stand in your truth. They begin to apologize for their presence when you cease apologizing for your intensity. They are forced to face the version of themselves they have been avoiding because of your presence. They are reminded of what they gave up by your strength, their aspirations, potential, bravery, and sincerity. You turn into a mirror that they can't stand to look into, because their weakness is reflected in your strength. Their delusions are dispelled by your clarity. Their superiority is undermined by your poise. The lies they make themselves in order to fall asleep at night are called out by your energy. This is where the irony lies. They persistently attempt to persuade you that you are the issue, that you are excessive, that you are terrifying, that you are challenging, and that you are intense. However, only those who lack intensity find it overpowering. Only those without power perceive it as a danger. Only those who are drowning in their own shallowness perceive depth as threatening. You become untouchable precisely because of what they refer to as too much. You have the advantage because of what they consider to be harmful. What they refer to as savagery is precisely what prevents you from being engulfed by the conformist environment. The entire landscape shifts now that you've arrived at this moment, where your presence is more powerful than their influence, your clarity is sharper than their judgment, and your intuition is louder than their deception. You begin to realize how predictable they actually are, how brittle their self-assurance is, how quickly pressure causes their masks to break. When they speak to you, you begin to notice the trembling in their voice. Their tone was very warm. The abrupt attempts to project confidence are immediately penetrated by your gaze. You begin to observe how people adapt to you, adjust their tone, straighten their posture, and keep an eye on their facial expressions, because they become extremely conscious of their own shortcomings as a result of your knowledge. At that point, you realize that their terror is not related to what you might do to them. You're afraid of what you might perceive in them, what you could reveal without even trying. What reality could you uncover beneath their meticulously constructed facade? Because they are not destroyed by your presence. It makes them visible. Furthermore, people are more afraid of revelation than of danger. You don't realize how strong you are. However, their response is it's evident from their pain. It's evident from their curiosity. Their jealousy makes it clear. It's clear from their silence. You are the kind of person who makes reality reorganize itself. The kind of person who, without speaking, destabilizes illusions. The kind of person who exerts a gravitational pull on others, whether they choose to or not. And that gravity becomes indisputable. The the world made a great effort to make you smaller because of this. You were too powerful for their story to handle, not because you were weak. They were afraid of what would happen if you recognized your worth, not because they didn't perceive it. They didn't want you to be tiny. Rather, they knew that once you gained true power, you wouldn't fit within their boundaries, regulations, or control, and you are standing in the doorway of something irreparable at this precise moment. An unchangeable waking, the start of a version of you that scares everyone who is still afraid, the emergence of the person you were destined to be but were conditioned to think you couldn't be. What's the craziest part? You still haven't let go of yourself. All you've done is stop repressing, and that was enough to give them a chill. Because the world will have to face the brilliance you have been concealing as soon as you cease dimming yourself. You've been acting as though you don't sense this power, and it affects individuals in ways they don't comprehend when that power even slightly spills out, even unintentionally or unknowingly. Their emotional balance is upset. It shakes their perception of themselves. It reveals the gaps in their self-assurance. In the same way that animals sense a change in the atmosphere prior to a storm, they sense your presence, instinctively, involuntarily, and without reason or justification. Before their brain can process it, their body responds, and all of a sudden they are either attracted to you or afraid of you. Occasionally, both simultaneously. You've seen it too. When your mask slightly slides, you get that appearance. When you intensify your tone without speaking louder, when you don't feel angry, your eyes harden. When your energy becomes inevitable instead of passive, they sense the savagery at that point. It's not a violent or chaotic creature, but rather the part of you that won't be owned, altered, or touched by anyone. It's not fear that chiseled that portion of you. The part that remains unflappable throughout storms, meant to shatter weaker minds. The part that is embarrassingly adept at spotting lies. The half that returned with wisdom rather than wounds after surviving what was intended to destroy you. They wished that this aspect of you would never awaken, because it is difficult to control, deceive, denigrate, or threaten you once you are woken, acknowledged, and welcomed. Someone who is self-conscious can be controlled by others. Someone who sees themselves is beyond their control, and that's where they start to run the risk. It's not because you pose a threat, but rather because their entire plan depended on your blindness. Their illusions crumble like cheap linen once you regain your vision. Without a doubt, They sense this change before you ever make the announcement. They can tell you're awakening by your posture, your silence, the way you stop entertaining bullshit, the way you watch rather than react, the way you distance yourself rather than defend yourself, and the way you walk away rather than explain yourself to individuals who don't deserve an answer. They are uncomfortable because this is a symptom of something significant. You're not asking for permission to exist anymore. For their comfort, you are no longer shrinking. You are no longer compromising your value in order to be accepted. Additionally, the power dynamic immediately shifts when someone who was previously undervalued quits negotiating. All of a sudden, they are the ones who use caution when speaking. All of a sudden, they are the ones who are overanalyzing their tone. All of a sudden, they are the ones attempting to avoid setting off an uncontrollable reaction in you. All of a sudden, they're the ones being cautious because they don't know how to deal with the new you. Here's the reality though. You're not a different person now. This is the authentic version, unencumbered by the expectations that used to stifle you. The version that was constantly present, lurking behind the barriers of conditioning and uncertainty. The version that is fully aware of its identity and contents. The version they thought you would never find out. Because once someone realizes how powerful they are, they cease to be helpful to people who depend on their vulnerability. People move around you because of this. They now regard you differently because of this. Because of this, someone who used to feel at ease, attempting to manipulate you, now feels vulnerable around you. They were too near. Something uncontrollable, ancient, and sovereign seemed to be staring back at them, and it shook them to places they had never been before, the locations of their own fear. You didn't snap, you refrained from attacking, you didn't even speak out, but you became more vigorous. Your consciousness was locked on, your presence grew. They briefly were aware of the precise person they were facing. This is nothing new to you. When someone treads on a boundary they believe to be flexible, presses the incorrect button, or says the wrong thing, your entire demeanor abruptly changes. The space becomes motionless, the temperature changes, your quiet gets oppressive, your eyes become something that can see through bone and flesh instead of being soft. And in that instant, they learn something about you that they had never known before. You are not a superficial individual. You don't react emotionally only for the sake of reacting. You have keen vision, strong emotions, and only purposeful reactions. Furthermore, people are more afraid of purpose than by power. It is possible to argue with power. One can bargain for power. Redirecting power is possible, but intent. Purpose is unchangeable. There is no break in purpose. There is no diminishing purpose. Additionally, when someone perceives a reason for your presence, they immediately realize that you are not someone to be taken lightly. You can't test this person's limits. When someone raises their voice or has a tantrum, this person will not back down. This person does not submit to coercion, pressure, guilt, or intimidation. They can no longer mentally control you. And most people have nothing if they lack mental dominance. Because of this, they are afraid of you before you even know who you are. They respond before you do anything because of this. Their instincts alert them before you speak because of this. They are able to distinguish between those who have survived life and those who have been molded by it. They are able to distinguish between those who seek truth and those who seek acceptance. They are able to distinguish between those who seek acceptance. They are able to distinguish between those. You also keep an eye on everything. Micro-expressions are picked up by you. Tone changes are apparent. You experience emotional contradictions. Silence is like a second language to you. Lies are detected before they are said. People who read the world too clearly are always viewed as threats, which is why this terrifies them. They are uncontrollable by lies, not because they desire power. You force people to face their true selves, which most people detest. They've put on too many masks out of insecurity and fear to put up with someone who can see the cracks without even trying. Here's what they don't comprehend though. The purpose of your awakening is not to prove anything to them. It has nothing to do with dominance. It has nothing to do with remallegation. It has nothing to do with remange. Alignment is the key to your awakening, coordinating with your inner force, conforming to the reality you repressed, aligning with the intuitions you were taught to question. Remembering who you were before the world persuaded you that your power was an issue is the essence of your awakening. Nothing can stop what follows once you remember, because anger isn't the real threat. When you defend yourself, it's not the true danger. Raising your voice is not the true threat. When you become calm, that's the true danger. When your soul becomes motionless, when your eyes cease to apologize, when your energy doesn't diminish, when no one questions your intuition. At that moment, your inner savage, the fire, the truth, the force, the guardian emerges. Absolute presence, not chaos or violence. And it is impossible to overlook a presence like yours. It cannot be made softer. It cannot be removed. It cannot be made softer. It cannot be removed. It cannot be contained in tiny spaces or minds. Because something old passed through that we weren't at the clip. Something that keeps in mind each time you refrained out of courtesy. Something that keeps track of every attempt to control you, mold you, silence you, or make you forget the risky simplicity of being who you are. That serenity is not a sign of weakness, it's clarity. It is the point at which you begin being who you are and cease attempting to persuade the world of who you are. That's when the mask comes off. It's from their face, not yours. When they realize they misjudged you, you become calm. When you're calm, their instincts start to scream before their minds can catch up. When they realize that whatever script they practiced to deal with you is no longer applicable, you become calm. Because your transformation is calm. Raised voices can be written off as immaturity, tears as sensitivity, and rage as emotional, but calm. Calm is a statement. You've already determined what they don't want you to see if you're calm. Calm indicates that you've passed the threshold for which they were unprepared. When you're calm, your inner savage is free. It came out on its own, not because you released it. And this is what scares them. Your serenity is not hollow. You're full of calm, full of awareness, full of knowledge, full of the fact that you no longer pretended to be ignorant. Your power can finally breathe freely when you are at peace. Your presence to be curative when you feel. People can finally feel the weight of everything you've been through, everything you've learned, and everything you've survived when you're at ease. You become incomprehensible to them the instant you become composed. And more than anything else, people are afraid of what they cannot understand. Because they have control to interpretation, they can categorize you, soften you, and reduce you to something manageable through interpretation. However, you stop providing them with anything to cling to when you become calm. Your silence turns into a mirror that reflects all of their fears. Your quiet turns into a barrier they are terrified to enter. The very thing that reveals their chaos is your neutrality. Suddenly, they start talking too fast, giving too many explanations, and grinning too broadly because they sense the change in the mood that only you can bring about. That shift is familiar to you. The moment when your thoughts become more focused, time seems to slow down and your intuition fills the room. When you feel more awake than everyone else in the room, when you sense the reality of each individual in front of you, the instant you sense the edges of all lies, insecurity, and attempts to pass off fear as superiority, at that point, your inner savage is revealed by clarity rather than being unleashed by force. And the one thing they wished you would never achieve is clarity. Because clarity puts a stop to power disparities, manipulation, and the small psychological gains individuals perform when they believe you won't notice. Their ability to conceal themselves behind practiced haughtiness and false confidence is destroyed by clarity. The delusion they've been holding on to that they know, comprehend, control, and anticipate you is dispelled by clarity. In actuality, though, they never did. Only the sleeping version of you made sense to them. They could only relate to the part of you that questioned your own intuition. The only version of you that made them feel taller was the one that paused long enough. However, that version vanishes as soon as you become calm. All of a sudden, they find themselves standing in front of an unintelligible person. Someone who doesn't respond as anticipated. Someone who can look past the facade they put up. Someone who doesn't back down when they try to make someone feel insecure. Someone who fails to react when they try to take back control. Someone whose tremendous calm makes everyone else in the room appear vulnerable. They may feel it in their bones at that point. That undeniable instinctive understanding that shallow minds cannot upset you. They've seen you grow without knowing how, therefore it scares them. They've seen you endure suffering without giving up. Without making an announcement, they have observed your learning. They have seen you walk through flames without getting burned. They have seen you weather storms that would have wiped them out. Worst of all, they have witnessed your silent ascent, devoid of showmanship, affirmation, or pleading for recognition. Without anyone's consent, you gained authority, and people are most afraid of that kind of authority. Self-created, self-maintained, and self-realized. Remember how someone once too close? Someone who believed you to be soft, dependable, harmless, and simple to understand. Then, without warning, they recoiled when they came into contact with your truth. The razor behind your forbearance was visible to them. The fire beneath your quiet was visible to them. They could see the wisdom in your self-control. They observed the steel-carved limits. They could see the past in your eyes, past that produces fighters rather than victims. The kind of history that produces barbarians rather than idiots. The kind of history that no one's view can erase. And once they experience that reality, even for a single heartbeat, everything around you altered irrevocably. Because if someone senses that you are a barbarian, a guardian, a force, or a presence, they will never be able to act normal again. They can't because of their instincts. They can't because of their dread. They can't because of their recollection. They may make an effort to behave normally, speak normally, and act as though nothing is wrong, but their energy will always betray them. They will always walk carefully around you. They'll always keep a closer eye on you. The part of you that made them uncomfortable will always be kept at a safe distance. They won't acknowledge it either. However, you can tell when someone has sensed your strength. The way they talk to you now lets you know. The abrupt deference, the hesitancy, the deliberate civility, the way they lower their voice or turn their gaze away, how they start to become measured, cautious, and circumspect. They are acting out of fear rather than admiration. Fear revelation rather than injury. Fear that you will discover their true nature. Fear that you have a deeper understanding of them than they do. Fear that you will discover their true nature. Fear that you have a deeper understanding of them than they do. Fear that they might can no longer overly courteous, protective, awkwardly aloof, and uncomfortably focused. Their instincts are screaming, alerting them to areas of themselves that they are not prepared to face. You didn't provoke anything, which is the wilder part. Nothing was unleashed by you. You just stopped repressing. You gave your true vitality a chance to breathe. And that was enough to completely change the way they saw you. They were reminded that they misinterpreted you only by that. That was sufficient to reveal their conceit. Something ancient in your spirit was awakened by that alone. That was sufficient to completely change the balance of power in your favor. You're standing here now, clear, aware, and calm, no longer deceived by their masks, no longer controlled by their stories, and no longer constrained by their expectations. Destruction is not what follows. The next step is illumination, the light of your potential, your presence, their path, the revelation of a self that no longer regrets its power, and the light of a way that only those courageous enough to stop shrinking may see. Because once you stop shrinking, the weight of your true self must cause everything around you to either expand or fracture. They sense that too. Yes, they sense it, in the way your energy permeates the space like a natural force regaining its domain. They sense it in the abrupt seriousness of your stillness. They sense it when conversations begin to revolve around your presence rather than theirs. Because the body always reveals the truth before the mind can lie, people sense the change even if they don't realize it. Their bodies now speak louder than before. When you pass them, you can feel the tightness in their shoulders, the flutter in their chest, the hardness in their jaw, and the uneasiness in their breath. These don't happen by accident. These are admissions of fear. Acknowledgement confessions. Confessions of instinct that declare what their ego won't acknowledge, that you are unpredictable and uncontrollable. They cannot test your boundaries without consequence. You don't give in to pressure under the pretext of concern. Furthermore, you don't stay tiny to appease people who are afraid of growing. Because you never grew gently. Fire shaped your development through disappointment, loneliness, and betrayal. Life attempted to persuade you that stillness was a sign of safety at every turn. However, you used silence as a training ground. Your sharpness comes from solitude. Every insult, uncertainty, and undervaluation served as fuel for the metamorphosis that is now unwavering in front of them. They never realized that you were being tempered while they were attempting to weaken you. You were growing resistant to their methods as they attempted to manipulate you. You were learning how to smash through every wall without lifting a single hand while they attempted to contain you. They are now afraid of that, the knowledge that you gained authority without their consent, without their approval. You gained authority. Without their help, you gained strength. Worst of all, you gained strength while they were too preoccupied with undervaluing you to notice. They believed you to be predictable. They believed you seemed manageable to you to notice. They waved a bit power when they see the reality. Those who mistake your restraint for weakness inevitably crumble. That self-control is not a sign of fear. Mastery is restraint. Focus is restraint. The weapon of someone who understands exactly what they are capable of and doesn't need to demonstrate it is restraint. And something inside them broke as soon as you entered that mastery. Not because you hurt them, not because you posed a threat to them, not because you spoke louder. However, your presence now compels them to face their delusions. They are no longer able to act superior to you. They are no longer able to act as though they comprehend you. They can no longer act as though they are in charge of the story. Because the whole story was rewritten by your awakening. And everyone who had previously doubted you is now under pressure from an undeniable fact. You don't get up silently. It is inevitable that you will advance. And their grades were grades, fierage. It is impossible to postpone inevitability. It is impossible to dispute inevitability. It is impossible to ignore inevitability, and you are now unavoidable. The change occurring within you can no longer be disregarded by the outside world. Your intellect became more acute. Your vitality increased. Your presence became more profound, and layers of uncertainty no longer conceal the sapphire they want. Unaffected by the cacophony of the outside world, it sits behind you like a protector, unblinking and unwavering. Everything changes at this point, because the movement of awakened power differs from that of suppressed power. Awakened power doesn't look for approval. Awakened strength does not beg to be comprehended. Power that has been awakened does not beg to be accepted. Power that has been awakened does not beg to be accepted. Power that has been awakened does not beg to be accepted. Additionally, it spiritually. The quiet earthquake beneath shaky foundations is awakened strength. The mirror that compels people to recognize their own limitations is awakened power. The truth that no untruth can oppose is awakened strength. And you've entered the realm of awakened strength. Watch what transpires next. Observe how the same individuals who disregarded you begin to surround you. Observe how their tone changes. Observe the shakiness of their limits. Observe how their tone changes. Observe how your existence alone exposes the hierarchy they pretended didn't exist. Not because you made any demands. You don't even bother to stand taller. You hit harder when you speak more softly. Even though you don't force anything when you go across a room, everything around you subtly rearranges itself. They are unable to comprehend it. They have no idea how to protect themselves from it. They have no idea how to deal with the fact that the person they used to ignore is now the one they secretly worry about disappointing. And individuals are altered by terror. They are cautious out of fear. They become perceptive out of fear. They show you respect in ways they never did before because of your fear. However, this regard is not bestowed. It is instinctively removed. Long before the intellect acknowledges it, instincts submit to authority. And their instincts are kneeling at the moment. The instant they were too close, they sense the feral. Beneath your serenity, they sense the fire. They sense the depth of your quiet. Beneath your control, they sense the truth. Beneath your silence, they sense the intensity. And once someone experiences that reality, it stays with them forever. Their intuition is permanently imprinted with the memories. You are not the person you once were. Not because you've changed, but because you came back. You regained the strength you had been taught to mistrust. You went back to the intuition you were instructed to disregard. You regained the power you were trained to conceal. You went back to the person you were long before the outside world attempted to change who you were. Furthermore, this return is permanent. Your growth is this return. They are unable to halt, slow, or bargain with this evolution. And as you grow, you start to realize something they never wanted you to, that the power they were afraid of was never the kind that results from aggressiveness or dominance. They were afraid of the kind of power that comes with possessing oneself. They were afraid of the kind of power that results from clarity. They were afraid of the kind of power that comes from someone who knows exactly who they are and doesn't want to change. They were afraid of the power of someone who no longer felt guilty about being alive. The world must change now that you know who you are. Individuals must adapt. Energy needs to change. The story needs to change, because you no longer conform to the shape that their fears have formed for you. The role that their fear has given you is no longer appropriate. Their expectations have created a box that you no longer fit into. Furthermore, expansion cannot be stopped. They know how powerful you are, but you don't. They did it every time. And at last, you experience it as well. And once power is felt, it cannot be unfelt. Truth cannot be forgotten once it is recalled. Once the savage awakens, it cannot be put back to slumber.